Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for joining us today in our first meeting of the Board of Education for the 16-17 school year. Congratulations to our 3 newly elected board members, Paul Galetta, Barbara Goodman, and Eddie Floshower. Item 4.01 on the agenda is the administration of the oath of office to the newly elected board members. Mr. Galetta, please stand. Please raise your right hand. Read the oath of office stating your name.
I, Paul Galetta, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of trustee of the Wappinger Central School District Board of Education, according to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Barbara Goodman. And please raise your hand, and you have to raise your right hand.
I, Barbara Goodman, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of trustee of the Wappinger Central School District Board of Education according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, thank you.
Let's count the votes.
I tripled now when it's
Please raise your right hand. I and state your name.
I state your name. I, Eddie Floshower, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of trustee of the Wappinger Central School District Board of Education, according to the best of my ability.
I'd like to note in the minutes that Trustee Galetta and Goodman were administered their oath of office and signed the oath book on July 1st, and Trustee Floshower was administered the oath of office and signed the oath book on July 5th prior to executive session. It was duplicated here for family and friends and the public to share in this important event. Moving on to item 4.02, board member review and sign code of ethics. Each year, all board members are asked to review and sign Policy 2160, School District Officer and Employee Code of Ethics. In your board packet was a copy of the policy along with the exhibit. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to review the policy and then sign and date the exhibit under your nameplate and pass it to me. Okay, moving on. Item 4.03, Superintendent Oath of Office. Mr. Carrion, may I ask you to come up forward for the oath of office? Yes, sir. Raise your right hand.
I, Jose Carrion, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Superintendent of Schools of the Wappinger Central School District according to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Item 5.01, election of the board president. I am now requesting nominations for the position of board president for the 16-17 school year. Do I have any nominations? Mrs. Kraft?
Yes, I nominate Peggy Kellen for president.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Mrs. Lavelle? We have a motion made by trustee Carrath and seconded by trustee Lavelle to appoint trustee Kellen to the position. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Lumia?
Mr. Rubin?
Is there a second? Mrs. Pelton? We have a motion made by trustee Lumia and seconded by trustee Pelton to appoint trustee Rubin to the position. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, nominations are declared closed. Now we'll move on to the vote. If you can please raise your hand for the one person in favor of the board president. So first, all in favor of Peggy Kellen for the position of president, please raise your hand. Bear with me, please. Paul Gavetta, Barbara Goodman, Karen Carrath, Peggy Kellen, Annie Lavelle. All in favor of Mr. Rubin for the position of president, please raise your hand. Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin. Do you have a vote, Mr. Solshower?
Abstain.
Okay. Okay, so that's 5-3.
Can I make a resolution?
Congratulations.
I can make a resolution, make it unanimous?
Trustee Trustee Kellen has been appointed president of the Board of Education for the 16-17 school year. President Kellen, now I'd like to administer the oath of office to the president of the Board of Education. Raise your right hand.
I, Peggy Kellen, will support do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of President of the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District for the 2016-2017 school year, according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Please take your seat next to the superintendent, Madam President. You are now chair of the meeting and may conduct nominations for vice president of the Board of Education, which is item 5.02 on the agenda.
5.02, Board Vice President. The next item is a motion to, we need a motion to nominate someone to serve as Vice President of the Board of Education for the Wappinger Central School District for the 2016-2017 school year. Do I see a nomination? Mrs. Laval. Karen Carrath, do we have a second? Mr. Galetta. Okay. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Lumia.
Mr. Rubin?
Mr. Rubin, any second? Mrs. Carrath. Okay. All those in favor of Mrs. Carrath as Vice President? Mrs. Laval, Mr. Slowshower, Mrs. Kelly. Okay. All those in favor of Mr. Rubin? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Carrath, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin. Mr. Rubin is elected Vice President.
Mr. Rubin, may I ask you to take the oath of office?
Yes. I was like, we just did a little bit over here. I just want to know.
I'll give him my, here, Lou, use your name tag here.
I, Robert Rubin, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and will faithfully discharge the duties of Vice President of the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District for the 2016-2017 school year, according to the best of my ability.
No, that's all right. If I were to go that way, you would. So for today, we can do this way.
We're playing musical chairs because we have to confer on which places which of us read. That's basically it. No secrets. The next item on the agenda, 6.01, is the consent agenda resolution. Is there anyone who wishes to pull something from the consent agenda? Mrs. Pelton.
6.19, please.
Anyone else? Mr. Slowshower?
6.04, and I concur with Trustee Pelton, 6.19.
Anyone else? All right.
That's it? Thank you. Resolved that the, is this on? No. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the following consent agenda items as stated: 6.02, 6.03, 6.05, 6.06, 6.07, 6.08, 6.09, 6.10, 6.11, 6.12, 6.13, 6.14, 6.15, 6.16, 6.17, and 6.18.
Do we have a motion? Mr. Lumia. Second, Mrs. Pelton. All those in favor? Unanimous. 6.04.
Resolved Resolved that the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District does hereby approve the following appointments for the 2016-2017 school year as stated.
Motion. Mr. Rubin, second. Mr. Lumia, discussion?
I just have a quick question with regards to 6.04. Do we have an exact amount as to what the expenditure was for legal services? It states in the memo dated March 11, 2016, 972.45 hours. It was anticipated reaching the approximate 1,667.05 hours by June 30th, 2016. Did we reach that number? Did we exceed that number? Or were we within our 1,500 hour cap?
The last update we received from the attorneys covered up through May. We have not received the final one yet.
Do we have a number that we could disclose to the public as of the latest correspondence with the law firm?
I don't have that number available to me, but again, it is reviewed by every member of central office staff, every bill that comes in to ensure that all charges are accurate. But I do not have a number for you at this time. I was not prepared for that.
Okay, if maybe you could provide it to us at the next board meeting, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
The will of the superintendent, I certainly will.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. 2.19. Oh, 6.19.
6.19. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby readopt all existing 2015-2016 board policies for continuation during the 2016-2017 school year unless revised, amended, or retired by action of the Board of Education.
Motion. Mr. Rubin, second. Mr. Lumia, discussion. Mrs. Pelton.
Well, I absolutely understand that the district cannot function without the policies being readopted. What is not deciphered within this resolution is to exclude the code of conduct as it's not required until September 1st. So since the code of conduct has been referred to the committee to be reevaluated and based on community input and board discussion, I'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution to exclude the code of conduct as it is not required until September 1st.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Rubin. Any discussion? Mr. Lumia.
I think it's important, even though it's not required.
Microphone.
Even though it's not important until it's required to September 1st, I think it's very important that we get that particular code of conduct gets adopted before September 1st because it has to be printed, it has to be given to each student. So I think at the next board meeting or the one after that, whatever, I think we have to make a decision about the code of conduct. We can't wait until September 1st. So I don't mind the addendum, but I think it should be, can't wait until September 1st.
Mrs. Pelton.
I would like to amend that resolution just to remove September 1st. And, I'm not sure how far along the Code of Conduct Committee is, but I think that within two meetings might be.
Yeah,
Do we have a date of our second meeting?
we have a date, August 15th, I believe it is, and then the following is the 22nd.
August 15th, I think it's required.
Does that give you enough time, Jose?
Absolutely, absolutely. As this present board and the former board knows, and historically, we're way ahead of the game with the code of conduct. I shared some of the work that we'll be doing with the administrators in this weekly memo review in terms of really looking at restorative practices, and that's, the route, so we really have to align ourselves with the code of conduct to make sure that it reflects in the movement we're going.
Yes, Mrs. O'Connor.
I would simply like to reiterate my concerns regarding, my broad concerns regarding the policy manual with respect to the idea that while we're concerned that they be consistent with state law, that really there's significant concerns to be considered, and this, I hope that this board will endeavor to revisit these highly charged policy concerns.
Mrs. Goodman.
One of the issues involved is simply implementation. Difficulty of implementation doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't be done. So what I'd like to do is ask the superintendent what plans he's made so that students' privacy and sense of modesty would be maintained even in a change of policy.
Mrs. Pelton.
I just want to point out that at the, respectfully, at the reorg meeting, it's a technicality to readopt policies, and that it's my understanding that if it's a particular issue with a policy, to address it to the policy committee or the superintendent, but this as it's written is just a yearly thing that we're required to do to adopt the policies as a manual. I hope that's helpful.
All right, do we have, did you have a motion then to amend this? Do you want to continue with that, or just?
A motion to amend it to exclude the code of conduct as it is not required in the readoption of the policy manual.
Until August 15th.
Until August 15th.
No, we need that.
Yes. A second.
Yes.
Mr. Rubin. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous?
No.
Oh, well, no, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Karat, Mr. Sloshower, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, and Mrs. Keller. Opposed? Mrs. Laval. Okay, now we need a motion for adopting the district policies without the code of conduct, right? Do we have a motion? Mrs. Karat, second. Mr. Rubin, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Karat, Mr. Sloshower, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Kellen, opposed. Mrs. Lalonde. Okay.
Madam President, here's a point of order for a
Yes.
moment. Just customary, again, Ms. Pedro, would you prefer, and would the board president prefer a roll call on votes? So that you clearly understand and see which trustee is voting in which manner? Is that a method
When
you would
she's
prefer?
reading the names out loud, that's good for me.
Okay.
Yes, I just say unanimous if it's everybody to
Just asking. Thank you.
expedite the meeting, but otherwise I do mention people. Okay, 7.01, adoption of the 2016-2017 Board of Education meeting calendar. Sure, next page. Here, you can use that one. You got it? Here's mine. Here you go.
7.01.
Okay.
Thanks. Resolved that the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District does hereby adopt the 2016-2017 Board of Education meeting calendar as stated. I don't think I have to read this.
All right. Do we have a motion? Mrs. Pelton, second. Mrs. Goodman. Discussion? Mr. Luna.
Is it appropriate this time to look at when we're gonna meet for a board retreat? Should that be part of the, for this particular resolution?
I think it would be a good idea if we had polled the board and find out when they would be available, and then come back with the board retreat date, unless everyone is sure right now that we have. a
August
date.
15 would be an appropriate time to talk, okay?
Yes, I think so. And if you would let us know, Mrs. Pedro know before that, your availability, then she'll be able, because usually we get somebody to come and speak to us, and we have to get on their calendar. Okay? We do the board retreat very economically in this district, believe me. We meet in the district office, we don't go to fancy places, and we get somebody in who will be reasonable if we have to get a speaker in, all right? Thank you. All right, then, all those in favor? Unanimous.
Mrs. Williams, did you say yes? Thank you.
Yes, right, okay. Okay, committees membership, 8.01, adopt a school.
I think you just have to ask who wants to adopt.
Okay. Now, I do know, just for information, that it was suggested that the board might consider just not specifically adopting a school, but all just taking school, trying to get to as many as possible. So I think maybe that needs to be considered because we got that in the weekly memo. So if anyone has any discussion on the subject of adopt a school, whether you like the idea or not, Mrs. Belcher.
I support what was in the weekly memo, just allowing all of us to be a part of all the schools.
Okay, is there a second to that? Mr. Lumia? How many, let's say, all in favor of not doing specific adopt a school? Okay.
I think it's really,
Unanimous.
it's really not, I think it's, really is that excuse me, I think it really is that the entire board has agreed that every member will adopt every school.
Right. Yes, so instead of specific schools, and of course, everyone was always welcome to visit any school, for the benefit of the new members of the public, the whole board is notified of events at the schools, and board members are welcome to visit a school, make an appointment with the principal if they just want to visit a school, and that's an excellent thing. And we try to get to as many schools as possible in the course of the year. 8.02, approve the establishment of committees for the 2016-2017 school year.
Resolved that the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District does hereby establish the following committees for the 2016-2017 school year as stated.
Now again, just to give everyone the background on that, we were sent a list of possible committees, and the board does not every year have all these committees. So basically, we have to decide which committees we want and who would like to serve on them.
Have to vote.
Yes, first we have to vote on establishing and approving the committees. As establishing the following committees, so I think we need a vote actually on each committee that we want to establish, don't we? Because we don't have all those committees. We've never had that many
They're
committees.
district committees without any board member
Right.
representation. So for them to function,
Right.
the board is supposed to establish them so
Right.
that they can have meetings and go forward.
Right, but wouldn't this also include all these board committees? We never have all these board
8.03
committees.
is where you'll see the actual board committees. There's a
Okay.
lot more than
Yes,
normal.
yes, so in other words, this will include both, but we're not actually establishing them as such until we get that. Fine, okay, very good, want to make sure we're clear on that. All right.
Thank you, I need a second.
All right, because that was a little confusing. Okay, could we have a motion for establishing committees? Mrs. Belton, second. Mrs. Karat, discussion. Okay, all those, yes, oh, Mr. Slusher.
Are we going to pick out from this list, or are we going to approve
Okay, apparently,
those from what's listed here and what the process to adding a committee?
Okay,
To vote on this first?
yes, we vote on this first, Mrs. Pedro explained, and then we, on 8.03, we'll get into the specific committees and decide which ones we actually feel we need this year. Sometimes a committee isn't really needed a certain year because we've just done a lot on it and things that we seem to not need that work this year. And so rather than spreading ourselves so thin that we're going through the motions, we just have the committees that we feel we're gonna work on this year, and we're gonna, because the board does put a lot of time in on those committees that we serve on that year. Okay, all right, so this is, yes, Mrs. Brown.
I just have a quick question. Are there any district committees that are brand new on the list, or are they all committees that have been active in this school year?
I would say the committee on preschool, oh no, not the committee on preschool special education, I made a mistake. Was that? I don't think it was, excuse me? The legislative advocacy committee?
The district one, the Ds.
The Ds. No, the Ds are.
Ds are all active?
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Rubin.
Personally, I'd like to thank Mrs. Fedra for this, because I think that this in particular is, she does a lot of work on every item on the agenda, but this is in particular, Mrs. Fedra, I want to say thank you, because you had a seminar or a webinar that you attended, and I looked at that and I said, whoa, okay, there's a lot more than I remember ever being. Thank you. So I think you deserve some credit for that.
Yes.
A lot of credit, all the credit.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Sloshower.
The Professional Development Committee?
Okay.
Yes.
Is that
The Professional Development Committee has always been in existence. It's runs from the Curriculum and Instruction Department. It's has a group of administrators, teachers, other support staff members, and they actually get together, they discuss professional development, and we're required by state to have a professional development plan.
And the shared decision-making committee?
The shared decision-making committee, that's Part 154, I believe. Our school district used to, maybe Mr. Lunia can help me out a little bit, but at a certain point, the schools would receive money to fund the shared decision-making committee, but all schools are required to have a shared decision-making committee that consists of their school community, all the different constituents, and basically reach overall consensus on school matters. Dr. Shuketz is nodding his head.
And Mr. Carey, and then just the last, the Parent Advisory Council.
The Parent Advisory Council, that is something that we're putting through, but at the same time, I think it's something that we really want to see how we're going to implement a Parent Advisory Council. So as these get approved, it's not saying that they will all be implemented, but for example, we may come back, just to give you a quick example, we may come back with Dr. Cardwell because one of her goals for the 16-17 school year is to explore pre-K. And if we get to a point where we're exploring it to a point where we need a committee to continue to move forward, we will.
Will each of these committees have a charter?
Mrs. Pelton.
As per the newly adopted policy on forming a committee, this is just to establish the committee. All committees must have a charter as of the new policy, and all committees must have their members approved by the board.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussions? Mr. Sloshower.
Would it be appropriate at this time to make a motion to add another committee for consideration?
That would be a member addition. That would be at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor of approving the district and board committees as listed in 8.02? Unanimous. 8.03, designate board members to serve on board committees. Just to let everyone know, 3 board members shall be selected to serve on the following board committees for the 2016-2017 school year. The board president serves as ex officio on all board committees. All right, the first 3 committees are required. The others are at the discretion of the board if you want to do it this year. So I don't think we need to approve that we're going to do the first three committees just need 3 members, because we've already approved everything in the previous. But then when we get to the others, we'll have to go through and see if we want to have it back this year, all right? That work all right, Mrs. Pedro?
Yes.
Okay, try to expedite. All right. Number 1 is the Audit Committee, which is a required committee. We need 3 board members, and we have 2 members from the public on that each year. Who would be willing to serve on the Audit Committee?
I think it's time for somebody else. I've been there for 3 years.
But you do such a good job. Is there anybody else? Mrs. Laval, you also have been on the committee.
Mr. Laval wants
We
to.
try to find people who have, have some expertise on certain committees, and these people have financial background.
If there's nobody else, I'll take it.
Mrs. Laval says yes. Thank you. So that's Mr. Slowshower, Mr. Galetta, and Mrs. Laval. And then we will be selecting 2 public members at the next meeting, would that be? Is that usually at the next meeting? 15 people can apply to be there.
I believe Kristen had informed me.
You have people?
That we have to set a meeting in July, Kristen?
We'll be in touch.
All right, good. 17. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. The district-wide school safety team is also required. We need 3 people to be on the district-wide safety team. All right? Oh, that's good. Exactly 3. Mr. Galetta, Mr. Rubin, and Mr. Lumia. Okay, number 3, the Wellness Committee. Again, required. We need 3 members.
Can I ask what?
Sure.
When did this become required, and where, and what are we doing?
Okay, yes, Mrs. Pedro, could you explain when it became required? Or how you found out?
When I learned about it from attending a webinar and realized that we needed it, the Health and Safety Committee is required per state regulations. It's also in policy 8112. Oh, sorry, wellness? I'm ready for that one too.
All right.
Required by federal and state law.
Do you know which federal and state law?
I can give that to you. I don't have it on me right now.
Okay, thank you.
Wellness Committee, we need 3 members. Mrs. Pelton. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, how many hands are up so that I know whether we have? Okay, Mrs. Pelton, Mrs. Laval, and Mr. Rubin. The Capital Improvement Committee, this is at board discretion. First of all, we have to vote. We want to have the Capital Improvement Committee. We've been having it because we're doing a lot of projects, so we're kind of, all those in favor of keeping the Capital Improvement Committee? Unanimous. All right. Volunteers for the Capital Improvement Committee. Okay. Mr. Lumia, Mr. Slowshower, Mr. Rubin.
For the public information, there's a meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock. That's our first meeting, so you better make it.
Right. Policy Committee. Again, we've been working hard on revising the board policies with the help of NISBA, the New York State School Boards Association. And so, first of all, we need a vote.
May I ask a
Yes.
question before we go on?
Sure.
Is there any minimum or maximum number of committees that a board member can be on? Anybody know that?
I don't think there's a minimum or max. If they're willing to serve so many committees, first they have to be crazy, but besides that, they can serve as many as they want.
Okay.
I think if we had more than 3 people volunteer, and some people were already on a lot of other committees, it might be nice to step aside and give that person a chance, but hopefully they will all fall out if we have too much trouble. All right, the Policy Committee. All those in favor of continuing the Policy Committee? Unanimous. All right, volunteers for the Policy Committee. Okay.
I'll back off then.
Okay. Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia, and Mrs. Karat. Legislative Action Committee, for public's information. This year, last year it was voted to do it, but we never got enough people to get together and write a charter, and there was confusion about policy on it, so it never got off the ground. So let's have a vote and see if we want a Legislative Action Committee this year. All those in favor of a Legislative Action Committee? Okay, Mr. Sloshower, Mrs. Pelton, Mrs. Caraff, Mrs. Laval, Mrs. Keller. Okay? Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, were you voting opposed or for? Okay, Mrs. Goodman opposed. Abstaining? Mr. Galetta, Mr. Lumia, Mr. Rubin. Okay? All right, we have 5, so we have the committee. We need 3 members. Okay, do we have volunteers for the Legislative Action Committee?
I would hope so.
Well, I don't know if we have a committee if we only have 1. Can it be a committee with just 2?
I think so.
I think it's 27. What policies are
If I raised
All right, we have.
Anyone who's interested and has knowledge of advocacy work, board members, it's any number.
Okay, usually legislative action means contacting our elected representatives and the State Department of Education to promote policies that have been approved or resolutions approved by the board. So you act with the authority of the board, but in other words, help carry our message.
Once a charter thing is established, then I might consider it.
Right, okay, first they need a charter, okay?
No, I'll be on the committee.
Okay, well, let's see, we need 3 people. 3 people, okay, raise your hand if you're on it. Okay, Eddie, Ann, and Barbara. By the way, all board members are welcome to attend the legislative session in Albany in the spring. And of course, anytime any of us go to a legislator, the other board members are welcome to come. So it doesn't exclude you from doing that. Okay, Public Relations Committee. Again, we didn't have it last year. We had it the year before, and they came up with a lot of excellent suggestions, members from both the public and the board. And last year, the administration worked very hard and implemented those things. So, does anybody? Yes, exactly. So that's how many people want to do it. Have a Public Relations Committee this year. All those in favor? Okay, Mr. Sloshower, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Caraff, Mrs. Laval, Mrs. Keller. Opposed?
Let's make it unanimous, okay? Lumia too.
Okay, and Mr. Lumia too. Unanimous. Okay, now we need members, all right? Who would like to serve on the Public Relations Committee? Mrs. Goodman, Mr. Rubin, and Mr. Lumia. Good.
That was evil.
All right, the Strategic Planning Committee. Mr. Carrion, since this involves the district, does this involve the district strategic plan?
Yeah, last year, Mr. Lumia, Mr. Rubin, I apologize, I can't remember the 3rd member on the board. Was it just you and Mr. Lumia?
I think it might be
Just the 2 of us, that's all it was.
And Peggy, of course.
Yeah.
All right, okay. All right, then, how many people are in favor of having the Strategic Planning Committee? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Caraff, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia, Mr. Sloshower, Mrs. Kelland. Opposed? Mrs. Laval. All right, now we need members. Okay, who would like to serve in the Strategic Planning Committee this year? Mrs. Caraff?
I'll go with her.
I know Mr. Sloshower has been on it before. So
I'll go with her.
okay, Mr. Rubin?
That was a separate
Oh, okay.
That was the planning
And
part,
Mr.
not the
Mr.
core
Lucas.
planning.
Okay, so that's,
No.
okay, we have Mrs. Karat, Mr. Rubin, and Mr. Lumia.
What the hell did I get into?
Some of you are going to be very busy this year. It's a good thing they're retired. But let me tell you, from being retired, it doesn't mean you stop doing things. All right, the Personnel Committee, all right? How many people are in favor of the board serving on the Personnel Committee? Mr. Sloshower, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Karath, Mrs. Laval, Mrs. Kelland. Opposed? Mr. Galetta. Right. Who would like to serve on the Personnel Committee? Okay. Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia. We can only have 3 plus the president. So, okay, let me see how many committees you're already on. Each of you. Yeah, I know, Ann and Eddie, and so I was trying to, yeah, and Mrs. Laval, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia were on it last year. Mr. Sloshower wants to be on it. Is there anybody who all really want to do it? Okay. Oh, yes, yeah. That when I saw that, I realized we had more than 3. Okay, Mrs. Goodman.
So do you have 3 then? I'm not clear on how many you have.
We had 4. We have to get it down to 3.
Then I don't want to make it worse.
Okay. All right. What do we do? Do we draw straws or?
Have a quarter. There's one, I don't know if this would make a difference, but there's one that wasn't listed, that Building Visitation Committee. The one on the beginning of it, it's marked, unless it's marked wrong. Is that board or is that
The reason I didn't list that is that at the beginning of the year, all board members go on the tour of the building, so that's
So we're not going
We're all on that committee.
So we only have the 10 then, or the 9.
Yes, Mr. Rubin.
I would like to just suggest that you take a moment of the people that have volunteered to serve on this committee. Take a look and see who's already on other committees, and the one who's obviously the one who's got the least should be on it, and just work your way up from there. Or if maybe somebody's willing to step back at this point.
Okay. All right. Is that process agreeable to the members of the board? Or would these 4 people like to talk about it?
I'll step back.
What's up? What'd you say?
I think she should be on it personally. I think she's going to make a good job, so I'll step down.
Sure. Okay. I think you've
I'd like to be on it,
Okay.
but look, with 4 people, somebody's got to bite the dust.
Yes, Mr. Sloshower.
I'm already participating in 3 other committees, so in fairness, I will defer. That way, everything is kind of distributed evenly. I will sit as an alternate in case one of the board members, for some reason, changes their mind or whatever. If that's acceptable to the board.
I say this respectfully. The Personnel Committee, the fact is that we have a new HR administration, and as we continue to get our feet wet, it would be great to continue with the same members that we had, only because we're still under a real exploration of working on really getting this really tightened up. And for the record, it's only for senior staff members and principals that the board committee serves on.
If I may make a suggestion, if the president of the board decided not to come to the meeting, then we could have 4 board members and the personnel committee. So I make a motion that perhaps on this particular committee, the 4 people who volunteer should be on it, and excluding what they call it, the president of the board.
Point of order. Just a point of order. I don't think Mr. Lumia has the authority to do that. The board president's ex officio on every committee.
Absolutely, but she doesn't show up. She says to show up, then 4 of us can be there.
That's a different.
A decision of the board is to make them aware of that.
Okay. If you want to do it that way.
No.
No, it's not right. Mrs. Bader is shaking her
I'm
head.
thinking perhaps that could be a charter discussion and then presentation to the board that way.
Mrs. Benton.
Our policy clearly states that the president can serve on all.
I know that, I'm aware of it. All I can say is if she decided to come and just sit there.
She's there, John.
Okay. Well, in the past, I don't think that was the case, but that's okay.
As I stated, I'll serve as first alternate.
Thank you, Mr. Sloshower, for resolving our problems. All right, thank you. Okay, I'm putting that down, alternate, Mr. Sloshower. Who knows, the rest of us may all be spread with the flu.
Someone could be on vacation,
That's
could be out sick.
right. That's true.
Mr. Sloshower, you may have to be ready on 5 minutes' notice.
You're right.
All right, the next item on the agenda, 8.04, is to approve the charter for the Audit Committee.
Resolved that the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District does hereby approve the charter of the Audit Committee for the 2016-2017 school year based upon recommendations of the committee as stated.
Do we have a motion? Mr. Lumia, second. Mr. Sloshower, discussion. All those in favor? Unanimous. 8.05, approve the charter of the Policy Committee.
Resolved that the Board of Education of the Wappinger Central School District does hereby approve the charter of the
Policy, my mistake.
Thank you. Does hereby approve the policy of the Charter Committee for the 2016-2017 of the policy, what did I say? Of the Policy Committee, for the 2016-2017 school year based upon recommendations of the committee as stated.
Do we have a motion? Mrs. Karas, second. Mr. Lumia, discussion. Mrs. Karas.
I just want to add, administration, number 3, under purpose, review sessions made by NISBA, the school district attorney, board members, staff, parents. Staff is there, okay. So what I had thought that we should put administration as well, but if you all think staff includes administration, that's fine. So I would take that.
Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. 8.06, membership, Dutchess County School Boards Association.
Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby elect to join the Dutchess County School Boards Association for the 2016-2017 school year for an annual dues in the amount of $875.
Motion?
Yes.
Mr. Galetta, second. Mrs. Goodman, discussion? All those in
Just say
favor?
that it's worthwhile. I'll just say that in my experience with them, I think this is an extremely worthwhile organization for us to participate in, and it leads to greater involvement in terms of local and state actions.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Usually we appoint an official representative. Can we do that tonight?
It's the next
That's the
item.
next item.
All right, good. 8.07, wasn't written out there. Dutchess County School Boards Association Executive Committee member. And if that person isn't able to go, somebody else can be the voting member that night. And in any case, everybody's welcome to come along if you'd like to see what's going on. But we just get one vote per school district. All right. Do we resolve first? There.
I think.
But we have a volunteer. Mrs. Karan did a wonderful job last year, but if she doesn't want to do it again or something
I
else.
would like to
wants
offer it to the rest of the members and as well as the new board members.
Okay,
You did a
good.
terrific
Yes,
job.
you did, fine job. Okay, do we have, does anybody want to be our official representative? It meets the first Thursday of the month. Mrs. Laval? Okay, are there any other people who wanted to do it?
No.
Or can we just?
I have to withdraw because many times they conflict with BOCES, and I'm a representative there.
Right. Mr. Rubin's on the board of the Dutchess County Board of Cooperative Educational Services. All right, so the only one who said they wanted to was Mrs. Laval, so we can vote for that. Everyone for Mrs. Laval?
Well,
Yes, wait a minute.
okay, I just want to know if
Right,
we have voting on her, and then we're going to read the
Well, we
resolution.
just want to make sure that there's nobody else wants to do it. Okay, all right?
Thank you.
All right? Okay, and nobody else wants to do it. Okay, then you can read the resolution.
Resolved that Ann LaValle be designated as the Wappinger Central School District Dutchess County School Boards Association Executive Committee member for the 2016-2017 school year.
8.0. Right, oh, sorry. All right, all those in favor, Mrs. Laval?
Wait, who made the motion and the
Okay,
second?
we need a motion. Okay, motion, Mrs. Karat. Second, Mr. Sloshower. All those in favor? Okay, okay, then it's Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Karat, Mrs. Laval, Mr. Sloshower, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mrs. Kellen. Those opposed? Abstain. Mr. Rubin. 8.08, membership, New York State School Boards Association, otherwise known as NYSBA.
Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the membership of the New York State School Boards Association for the 2016-2017 school year at a cost not to exceed $12,078. Motion.
Okay, we need a motion. Mr. Rubin, second. Mr. Lumia. Discussion. Mrs. Lamont.
We signed our oath this evening. It states that we should recognize that we endeavor to make policy decisions only after full discussion at publicly held board meetings, that we will render our decisions based on available facts and independent judgment, and refuse to surrender that judgment to individuals or special interest groups, that we would encourage expression of free opinion by all board members and seek systematic communications between board, student, staff, and all elements of the community, and that we would communicate to other board members and superintendent expressions of public reactions toward policies and school programs. This is about local control of our district. This is about us making decisions that are appropriate for the students in our district. I have found New York State School Boards Association in many ways to be very political, very politically driven, very much is, rather than representing the districts to the state, they're kind of feeding down from the state legislature, the regulatory decisions. I don't think that there's authentic dialogue or authentic representation, and I don't believe that that it's appropriate for us to continue to participate in light of the activities that I see has been engaging in and the context that I see them considering these state regulations in.
Mr. Lumia.
Advantages does the school board association provide the district for $12,000, almost $13,000. We save on the, we have savings on numbers.
Yes, could you enumerate them, please? Let's see, Mr. Carrion or Mrs. Crandall? What we get for this for membership?
Well, I'll start. NYSBA membership really provides assistance to the Board of Education, and
mainly the policy, I would say. There's a lot that we don't do as a district to participate with NISBA as other school districts do. I don't think that we rely solely on NISBA, but in terms of they have their 2 big workshops that happen twice a year, but we just get discounted. I think we still would have to pay, but it really provides you and keeps you updated with what's going on in New York State, what's going on in education. But as Trustee Laval said also, you don't have to, just because they send a certain policy or whatever, it's the board's discretion to, unless it's something that's breaking the law. But outside of that, there are policies that we tweak to make it work for Wappinger Central School District, and then there are policies that are the law we can't break.
We also receive, I know it's not really a big deal, but we receive a discount for our use of board docs
Yes.
for New York State school boards. And additionally, I just would like to point out, if you remember from our internal risk assessment from the 15-16 school year, the auditors did point out that we had deficiencies in our policy, and the auditors did in fact state New York State school boards, but that does not be the sole source for us to be able to receive our information.
Another thing that we do get is we get discounted rates for conferences. For instance, Mr. Rubin is going next week to represent us for a conference on school law, to give us all the updates on a number of changes in policy, including the controversial ones that have been discussed recently. And they also lobby for the school district with the different departments of the state education department and the legislature on our behalf, and all those policies are voted on at the annual convention of the School Boards Association, to which we can send members. And they only do exactly what the membership says they would like to do. Yes, Mr. Sochak.
They've just completed the revisions of our district policies. And again, I'm trying to understand, there's membership fees and then you pay non-membership fees. Again, justifying $12,000. I don't see the absolute significance. I mean, several years ago, we were not members of NISBA, and then, we found some money and then became members again. Another thing that kind of just, concerns me a little bit, what Trustee Laval had mentioned, we have a law firm on retainer. Most of the issues can be resolved by the law firm. I don't see any overwhelming benefit to be members and to spend this money. If we're going to attend something, we can attend something. I don't know how much of a discount we're getting. Is it significant enough that's going to save us a lot of money? They're going to be advocates to fight for whatever they're going to fight for, whether we're members or we're not members. Although, yes, we will not be able to vote on any particular decisions. But, in weighing the pros and the cons, I don't see any real significance to continue this membership. I think that money could be spent someplace else.
Mr. Lumia.
Just out of curiosity, what does it take for the 3 new board members to be trained? They have to pay those fees, correct?
It's in excess of $500
Per person?
before mileage and reimbursement.
Second, what discount do we get so far as those webpage you said?
School for
School
board docs.
tools or board docs?
Board docs.
How much of a discount do we get for that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I certainly can provide that in the next weekly memo.
Okay, Mrs. Pelton.
I would just like to say that there are times when I don't want to bother our attorneys with certain questions that I may have, because it does cost us money. And for small questions, I can call NISBA and I can speak with an attorney there for free. In addition to that, the updates that they provide regarding what is currently going on, the surveys that go out to help dictate what direction they go in, and we have about a year and a half left to go on our policy updates.
Mr. Rubin.
Mrs. Pelton, thank you. I was going to mention the lawyers, but I'd also like to mention that each of us on the board gets the newspaper called On Board, which keeps us up to date on what's happening on the state level, and I personally find that informative. And the legal certainly is something else. Thank you.
We also get daily emails on education news, which I find helpful, that I go through every day, and I find out what they're doing around the state and around the country. And we've had discussions, for instance, on the cursive writing. That's where I found those articles that I shared on cursive writing, and just to mention the latest issue. So that's very helpful. Yes, anybody else? Okay. All those in favor? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Carra, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Kellen, opposed? Mrs. Laval, abstention? Mr. Slowsheimer. Start of the regular business meeting. Okay, the first item there would be 10.01, public comments on regular business agenda items. Right, that's the items coming up after this. All right. Please limit comments to 3 minutes at the mic. The public comment period is a time slot set aside on the agenda for citizens to address the Board of Education. The Open Meetings Law does not require that citizens be allowed to participate and speak at Board of Education meetings other than public hearings. The law specifies that the public has a right to attend board meetings except for executive sessions. The procedure for public comment is outlined in Board Policy 1230, Citizen Participation. A total of 30 minutes is set aside for public comment at the beginning and end of the meeting. The maximum time allowed for any one speaker is 3 minutes. Public comments at the beginning of the meeting are limited to items on the agenda. Persons who wish to participate in the public comment portion of the meeting must state their name and the specific topic about which they wish to speak. As speakers must limit comments to issues appropriate for public discussion, compliments or complaints about student discipline, specific student issues, or personnel must not be addressed during public comment. Interruption of board discussion is not permitted. In the interest of civility and respect for different points of view, outbursts from the audience, applause, or other types of disturbances or disruptions are not permitted. Under no circumstances will booing be tolerated. The Board of Education recognizes its responsibility to hear and respond to public comment. As stated in Board Policy 1230, the Board is not able to answer questions at the meetings, but welcomes your statements. Any questions from the public should be submitted through the use of the public comment form, which may be obtained online or at the desk of the district clerk. Responses will be provided within 2 business days on the district's public comment responses page so that everyone may receive the information.
Questions with regards to some of the stuff that was on this evening's agenda. What, in fact, is the Wellness Committee? What does that entail? None of us are aware and know what that is. And the Assessment Committee, as well as the Report Card Committee, we need a committee to do report cards and assessments. Shouldn't the report cards fall under the house principals? And shouldn't the assessments fall under the principals as well as the superintendent? Not to give you more work, sir, sorry, but I'm just trying to understand how this works. But I'm more concerned about the Wellness Committee. What is that? Do we know what you need a committee for? I don't know what it is. Is it food? Is it the health of the children? Is this nurse stuff? Like, I have no clue. It's vast. Is that something you'd be able to answer for me?
I'm not allowed to answer it right now, but if you submit that in a question to Mrs. Pedro now, it will appear on the district page, public response to questions, and so the whole district will see what it is. It's a good question because I'm sure a lot of people would like to know the answers. So if you submit it, then everybody will be able to see the accurate answer. Yes, Mr. Carrion?
I have it down.
Okay, Mr. Carrion has it down, so you don't even have to write it. He's going to see to it that it comes on the page. Okay? Okay, sorry. Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening, Maureen Ryan. I've mentioned previously about my feelings on NISBA, and I think it's a very big mistake that we join a membership. The non-membership fees, I think, would be adequate for the needs. I don't like the involvement of the national level, speaking to the state level, and us just quickly taking everything that they're suggesting and jump on it. I think with their involvement.
Yes.
That's not on this agenda.
Oh, yes.
It's on tonight's agenda, though. Right? It's on the agenda tonight.
Actually, no, it was on the agenda of the past thing, the reorganization meeting, rather than on the business meeting. So you can mention at the end, though, where subjects of any sort can be discussed.
All right. So I'll wait your time later?
Sure. Okay, all right. Sorry, I know it's a little confusing having one meeting followed by another meeting, but that's the way the law goes. So.
All right.
Thank you. All right, did anybody else have something they would like to say? All right. Mr. Bittaker, our former board president, we're so delighted to see you here.
Where's the gavel?
I wanted to say something, but I'm a little bashful.
You?
My name is Mr. Whitaker, and I wanted to compliment you all. I think it was a very good board meeting. I compliment Mrs. Kellum and Mr. Lewin for the election to be your officers. And I wish you all the best for a good year.
Thank you.
It's a good group of people. Thank you.
We're not evil either.
Thank you. We try to follow your good example. Don't always succeed, but we try. All right, next. 10.02, communications announcements received by the Board of Education. All right, Mr. Slopshaw.
I know it might be a little late, but I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our seniors, all of our graduates from all three high schools. I just felt it appropriate to acknowledge them as a board member, just not as a member of the community. So I wish all of our graduates the best of luck. Please strive, be what you want to be, never give up, and hopefully everything that you aspire to be comes through. So congratulations to all of our seniors this year. I'd also just quickly like to thank our three speakers, Ms. LaBlassie, Ms. Ryan, and Mr. Bittaker for your comments. Thank you.
Mr. Lumian.
No, no.
Mrs. Pell.
No comments. Well, unusual, but.
As per the policy charter, I am required to give an update on our status in the policy committee. We've not received, as a board, a first reading for the second half of the 4,000s, because the second half of the 4,000s is a lot of curriculum and grading work. For the policy committee to do that work on its own would be unjust to the assessment committee, so I'm hoping I might be able to maybe answer a question. So as policy chair, I met with the assessment committee, who is a large group of teachers who work together to decide on the best ways to assess or grade the children, how we can better improve on that grading system. And as we've gone through changes with the K through 6, the assessment team has spent a year and a half working towards that K through 6 standardized grading. So in an effort to work with them and get all the stakeholders involved, these policies will take longer to be distributed, because we need to make sure that we're collaborating on the issues that the policy committee sees and the things that they have spent the last year and a half working on, as well as hearing comments from the public on grading. So it's going to be a little bit longer, plus we just established the policy committee again, but we should be looking for the 4,000, the second half of the 4,000 soon.
Mr. Rubin. Mr. Galano. Mrs. Goodman. Mrs. Karan. Mrs. Lalonde. I'd just like to first wish everybody, I hope everybody had a very nice 4th of July, celebrating our Independence Day. And I just recently learned of the passing of 2 of our longtime teachers who are retired, Sheila Klingman and Elaine Rigger. So I would like just everybody to know and remember, I know many of you would remember them. And just a side note, if at any time you hear of one of our current or retired faculty or staff who has passed away, if you would let Mrs. Pedro know, I try to go to wakes and at least send a card on behalf of the board. So, if you do have that, please share the knowledge with us, because we don't hear, obviously we won't be able to do anything. Thank you. And we do appreciate all the people who gave so many years to our district. All right, superintendent's report.
I'll be very quick. I share former President Bitter's sentiments as well. Welcome all to the new year. Happy New Year. In education, we tend to say we have 3 New Years. We have the traditional December 31st to January 1st, then we have reorg, which we consider a whole new year, and then when the kids start on the first day of school. So this is the second time for me to wish you all a happy New Year.
Oh, so you get to celebrate 3 times.
I celebrate 3 times, I do. I also want to take this opportunity, and I look forward to one of our workshops being our presentation. I've kept the former board abreast of Education Law 3012C and Education Law 3012D. We submitted on time, although they extended it for another period of time. We felt that we wanted to submit on time to ensure that we get what we believe is the best type of testing possible for our students, which means minimal testing and really testing that will help to monitor the growth of students, things that we looked at for our district, not because we were trying to appease Education Law 3012D, but we were trying to find assessments and tools that were really going to benefit our students as we continue to move forward. So we're very pleased with our submission, and now we just wait, and of course they get picked and call back and ask 1,000 questions, but we're pretty confident that we'll be able to start in September with our new plan that needed to be submitted.
I'll say, when we hear from the whole finality.
You want to
Pardon me, it's a statement.
Yes.
Is it possible to get actually what was submitted so we know exactly?
Sure.
Microphone.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. How do we as board members, are we able to learn more about just exactly what you have to put together? We're very happy to hear the emphasis placed on.
So as you already know, during the 2015-16 school year, Mr. Lokema and I gave, I believe, at least 2 presentations regarding the difference between, and also Dr. Bonk, regarding the differences between 3012C and 3012D. We have the entire document. It is posted on our website, and if it's not, we will have that posted tomorrow, the new submission. We needed to get all signatures from our president of the WCT, our president of the WAA, as well as the Board of Education president and myself. So it requires 4 signatures, and it's a very large, lengthy document that we will have scanned and ready for your weekly memo review on Friday. And as I said before, but the best way is to wait for us to provide you with a presentation maybe August 15th and really give you the breakdown of what it is that we have done. Dr. Cardwell, Mr. Zip, we really looked at what we were trying to submit and ensure that what we were doing was really great for students and extremely beneficial for teachers and extremely beneficial for principals. So there was no negotiating, and I can say this publicly, where it was negative. It was like, let's see how we can get you the most points, and let's do this right.
Any other questions? All right. 12.01, consent agenda resolution. Is there anyone who wishes to pull anything from the consent agenda? Okay, Mr. Sloshower.
12.02, 12.03, 12.06, 12.09.
Okay. Mrs. Goodman?
12.10.
10? Is that it?
Yep.
Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the following consent agenda items as stated: 12.04, 12.05, 12.07, 12.08, 12.11, and 12.12.
Do we have a motion? Mrs. Karan, second. Mrs. Pelton, all those in favor? Unanimous.
12.02.
12.02, support staff personnel list.
Resolved that the reading of the support staff personnel list be waived and the resignation, appointments, probationary appointments, contingent permanent, board employee compensation increase, side letter of agreement, substitutes, and volunteers be approved as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
Motion. Mr. Rubin, second. Mr. Lumia, discussion. Mr. Sloshower.
As a new sitting board member, I'm just not comfortable with this particular agenda item for this evening. So I'll be abstaining. And same will go for agenda item 12.03.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Carath, Mrs. Laval, Mr. Lumia, Mr. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Kelland. Against? Abstention. Mr. Sloshower. 12.03, teaching administrative personnel list.
Resolved that the reading of the teaching and administrative personnel list be waived and the probationary appointments, full-time, temporary appointments, 2016-2017 fall coaching appointments, and certified substitute teacher appointments be approved as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
Motion. Mr. Lumia, second. Mr. Rubin. Discussion. Okay.
Just for the record, my comments are the same as my previous.
Okay, all those in favor? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Carath, Mrs. Laval, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Kelland. Abstain? Mr. Sloshower. 12.06. Approval of minutes, June 29th, 2016, special meeting.
Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby adopt the minutes of June 29, 2016 as stated.
Okay. Motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Rubin, second. Mrs. Pelton, discussion. Mr. Sloshower.
At the time, on June 29th, 2016, I was not a current sitting board trustee, and I'm not comfortable approving minutes for a meeting that I did not participate in. I will be abstaining.
Okay. All those in favor? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Carath, Mrs. Laval, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Kelland, opposed, abstaining, Mr. Sloshower. 12.09. Approval of bid report, July 2016.
Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the finalization of the bid contracts as referenced in the July 2016 bid report.
Motion. Mr. Lumian, second. Mrs. Karan, discussion. Mr. Sloshow.
My copy of this memorandum, which looks like to renew our contract with Rhinebeck and Associates. Documentation that I received with the agreement is the original contract that was executed. I know we're looking just to extend this. The agreement mentions 2 exhibits. I have not received copies of those exhibits in my documentation. None of the information that was provided indicates what the dollar amount is for the contract, so I do not have any idea what the dollar amount is that I would be approving. Do we know what that dollar amount is?
Mrs. Crandall.
Sure. It is, this contract is a rollover from previous years, so whatever that information has been in the past, it remains the same. There has been no changes since the 2012 school year, and we can certainly provide that information to you upon request. Again, I didn't know about it in advance, or else I would have had it available for you this evening.
Thank you.
Just food for thought, especially just for new board members that might not be aware of prior contracts. And I know you will definitely make sure this is part of these agreements. Just when it mentions exhibits, it would just be helpful, just so myself and I'm trying to speak for the other board members, but just to get an idea of the information, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Just want to say quickly, if I may, also, all board members, as I repeatedly have shared, you're welcome when you get your board packet. We start posting once the board president and now the board vice president will meet bi-weekly. But if there's any information, do not hesitate to call prior to the meeting so that we can get it to you.
I appreciate that, sir. It was the holiday weekend, so I was not around. So
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So I'll take a little break.
Yes, Mr. Rubin.
Mr. Sloshow, welcome to board life.
All right. All those in favor? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Karam, Mrs. Amal, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Kelland, and Mr. Sloshow. Unanimous. Okay. 12.10, approval of overnight field trips.
Whereas the Board of Education has received a request for a field trip from the Wrestling Booster Club to travel to Colony High School in Albany, New York, and whereas the dates of the trip are December 9th and December 10th, 2016. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve the requested date dated June 2nd, 2016 from Josh Shoemaker. No, that was number 1. Number 2, whereas the Board of Education has received a request for a field trip from the theater Mastermind to travel to the 20th Annual Student Conference in Villa Roma's Resorts in the Catskills, New York, and whereas the dates for the trip are January 6th, January 7th, January 8th, 2017. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve a request dated June 13th, 2016 from Rosemary Evol. Excuse me? Evol. And 3, whereas the Board of Education has received a request for a field trip from John J. Cross Country to travel to Queensbury, New York, and whereas the dates for the trip are September 16th and September 17th, 2016, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education does hereby approve said requested date, June 17th, 2016, from Bob Lee.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Mr. Sloshow, second. Mrs. Karan, discussion. Mrs. Goodman.
I just noticed that the Mask and Mime trip is $350, and that kind of divides students between haves and have-nots. I just want to say for the record that I have a real problem with sticking hands in people's wallets like that without better provision for scholarships, without a better delineation of who would be eligible for one automatically, since some kids would rather die than admit that they can't afford it. Some adults would rather die than admit that they can't afford it. I think that there's something, I'll approve the trip. I understand it's a great trip. I admire the teacher for devoting her time to it. But I think there's something really insensitive about it. Thank you.
In Wappingers, we don't deprive any of our students from not attending if they, and I understand where you're coming from in terms of people may not, sometimes do not admit, but we're pretty keen in knowing, and all of our students, we do not deprive them the experience of attending any.
Where does that money come from?
Parent donations. One of the things that I'll tell you, I can say I've never seen, I've always shared this in the short, now I'm on 4th year, the amount of work that parents do and gather and collect to help organizations and teams and clubs, that's outrageous. You don't see it like in any other district like ours.
Especially
the
the mastermind.
Especially mastermind.
Do they fundraise? For
Yes, they
this-
do.
this
No
amount?
student's ever been deprived of a trip.
We have a scholarship.
You can go to the PTA for the money too.
Right.
They're-
Student government.
Right, and student government is very strong, so they go to student government as well. I mean, there's so many avenues in terms of really being able to make sure that we sponsor all of our students.
Are students who are in Mask and Mime aware that this is going to be set up so that there will be fundraising so that everybody will afford it?
Yes.
Or do they have to wonder and worry
No.
and not want to ask their parents and not know who to ask?
No, they know.
Okay.
It's a year after year.
Thank you.
It's an annual trip, and they know.
They're well aware, the students are well aware, and they people in charge do an excellent job. And no students deprived from taking the trip.
And I would like to add that in my experience, that's a district-wide thing, because I've seen similar parental commitments from both high schools, John Jay as well as Roy Ketchum. They do the parents do an excellent job in terms of their commitment to their students to participate fully in this program. Thank you.
I want to commend Mrs. Goodman for her concern, because, that's something that, is a concern of mine also, that we make sure, and it's wonderful that we have so many devoted parents who think beyond their own child, but to all the children, and are willing to put in so much time and effort to make sure. And I only wish it were possible for us to fund it all without having to, put any child in a position of having to admit that they don't have the money. So, Mrs. Goodman.
Something I think I'd like to see for the future, it's something we're thinking about, is some more formal addressing of the issue in the application for the trip. I read the application and it just sort of said, some fundraising. It really didn't make clear how people would react. Now, granted, there's a culture there that I'm not familiar with, and I get that. But I just think that people forget that we don't know what goes on in people's houses, including supposedly nice ones. And I think we need to be sensitive to that when we set prices for trips and set up parameters for who's going to be eligible for help and how they're going to be eligible.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Good point. I remember when IBM had the huge cutbacks, and I had a child in my Brandy troop and a child in my Cub Scout then, and their parents lost their jobs and they withdrew the children from Scouts, although I assured them that we would cover their children and that they would not have to pay a dime between the Girl Scout Council and the Boy Scout Council and the troop. They wouldn't have to drop out, but the parents pulled them out anyway because they were retrenching. You know, so that is an issue, and we have to be very sensitive to it and do everything we can to make sure no child is deprived of an opportunity. Okay? Thank you for raising that. All right, all those in favor? Unanimous? 3.01 and 13.01.
12.11.
Was that taken off? I think. Was 12.11?
No, oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes. 13.01.
Madam President,
Yes.
before, Dr. Bond, if you can do us the honors and introduce to us our new colleagues that are coming to.
I would be more than happy, Superintendent Carrion. In the back of the room, next to Principal Sipe, our new principal at Royce E. Ketchum, we have two of our new assistant principals, Mr. David Maffei. David, if you please stand up. And Mr. Adam Haley. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are new assistant principals at R.C. Ketchum, yes. Okay. At 13.01, additions to the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay, Mr. Rubin. Okay. Do we have a second? Mrs. Pelton. All those in favor of an addition to the agenda? Unanimous.
Resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the employment agreement of Superintendent Carrion covering the period July 1, 2016 through June 29, 2021, a copy of which shall be kept on file with the district clerk. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education is authorized to execute the aforementioned employment agreement on the district's behalf.
Do we have a second? Mr. Lumia. All those in favor? Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Carruth, Mrs. Laval, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Lumia, Mrs. Kellen. Opposed? Abstention. Mr. Sloshower. 14.01, comments from the public. At this time, you may speak on any topic that has to do with...
Madam
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sloshower.
And I apologize, but
That's okay.
you had only mentioned if there were any items to add to the agenda. You didn't mention discussion items or requests for information.
Okay, I'm very sorry.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Are there any...
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, you're quite right, that's just fine. Okay, are there any additional additions to the agenda for discussion or action or information? Mr. Sloshower.
Just several discussion items and a request for information. Based on the past several board meetings and something that I've mentioned myself at prior board meetings, not that I'm concerned, but I'm really very interested in the students' perspective on many things that are going on within the district. And I'm not sure whether the students are truly getting the voice that they should have in order to express their concerns, good or bad, about what's going on in the district. I know that sometimes several students do appear at board meetings. Sometimes it's not the best of times for them to appear at board meetings. But I think it would be a good idea for us to get some more information to what's going on in the schools, in the classrooms, student relationships in terms of athletics, extracurricular activity, and getting a better understanding, I think, from our students. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion that this board add a 10th non-voting seat to be occupied by a high school student to present the report to the board on any concerns or issues, as well as positive activities going on within the district. This report would be added as an agenda item to all board meetings during the public session, beginning with the first meeting in October of 2016.
Excuse me, but it should have been like an addition to the agenda and then a motion. I thought it was just a discussion. But if you're making a motion, Mrs. Pedro, do we have to back up and make an addition to the
Yes,
agenda?
First, he would need to make
Is
a
that-
motion to
okay.
make an addition
Yes.
for a discussion item, and then go forward with your discussion
Yes.
item.
Okay, my apology. I would like to make a motion then to add as an agenda item, discussion with regards to high school, discussion. Thank you.
Second.
Policy.
Mrs. Karan, those in favor?
For discussion?
For discussion?
All for discussion.
Unanimous? Okay. All right, Mr. Sosha.
With that being said, I would like to broach that subject for discussion with the board about adding a non-voting 10th seat to be occupied by a high school senior in order for the board to receive a monthly report on things that are going on throughout the district from the perspective of the students.
Do we have a second?
Are we motioning or are we discussing?
Are we just discussing right
Are
now?
we
Well,
just
discussion.
discussing, but we need a second to discuss, too.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Pelton? All right, discussion. Mr. Rubin?
Oh, I actually think that that is an excellent idea for the board to discuss, but it's not, I don't think it's something that we can just act upon right now.
How do you envision this taking place? Do you envision having a seat that more than one student would, that we could open it up to
What I
students
would,
participating?
again, we can discuss this, but what my vision would be a representative from each of the high schools on a rotating basis. That can be done through their student government. Obviously, they would communicate with each other as to what items they wish to discuss. Those 3 students from the high schools can then reach out to the student government at the junior high level. And as far as I know, there are several elementary schools that have started with student government as well. This way they can garner some information, bring it back, put something together, and present it to the board and the administration for discussion purposes from that standpoint.
Mr. Gallardo?
I would ask Mr. Carrion if there's processes in place now that allow students giving feedback on district issues. I'm sure there's processes in place at this point.
I think at the local level, but as from a district perspective, I know that when I started with our former board president, which we call senior talks, that's probably the most formal at this level to really get an idea of what's happening in our schools, really finding out from the students how we can improve upon our teaching, how we can improve upon our administrators, how we can improve upon just student-to-student relationships, so on and so forth. But nothing formal to where Mr. Sloshaw was referring to.
Mr. Rubin?
You know, these are just thoughts coming right now, but I'm curious, Mr. Sloshower, how would this be different? Obviously, this person would be kind of a liaison coming here and speaking in public, making a presentation to the board. They would not be a voting member of any public issue, and they certainly wouldn't be part of an executive session discussion.
Right.
But why would that be different than, say, kind of more formalizing, not formalizing, but stepping up a notch what Mr. Carrion just said, and having discussions on a periodic basis with the student liaison, and then have that board member report back to us? I'm not sure that the kids have that time to come here for the board meetings.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, to be honest with you, in speaking with numerous students in the district, believe it or not, there is a willingness to participate. And I think it would be a very good education for many of the students that are heavily involved in student government and do have aspirations for public speaking and different things. I think this is giving the students an opportunity to participate. And I understand what the superintendent is saying, but most of those meetings that he's mentioning, and he could correct me if I'm wrong, are kind of the senior exit meetings when they're seniors and they're graduating. So my point is, although he's getting feedback as to their experience and he's using that information moving forward, I'm looking to incorporate the everyday student with everyday activities in ways that we can help them or address any concerns that they may have.
But what I'm sorry, may I take this?
Yes, certainly, go right ahead. I was just communicating with somebody.
Oh, there you go then.
That's fine. No, I think it was quietly taken care of.
Would that not also be accomplished with a liaison from our district, from our board, to the high schools, and to meet on, I don't want to say monthly, but maybe a quarterly basis, and get feedback from them at their home schools? I don't know. I'm just being honest.
Well, ultimately, what my goal would be
My
is that
apologies.
I want to hear the students speak their concerns or the positives that are going on. I'm not looking to get information to bring back and share, although, again, that can be a positive thing. I'm looking to get the students more involved. And I take that back to Meet the Candidates Night, where we had our valedictorians in charge of that event and asking questions. And I had mentioned this at a prior meeting, that it might be a good idea to consider something like this, because I'm looking to get the students more involved in this process, because we are the governing body of the district. And I think it'd be a good idea for them to participate in a way. I'm trying to encourage more participation from the students in the community at board meetings. I think if students understood that they had a venue or an opportunity to speak about things in this type of setting, I think it would be a positive thing for the district and for the kids and for us to understand what's going on and to make appropriate decisions.
Mrs. Goodman.
I think it's a great idea to increase student say. Students live online, and online surveys can really go a long way, for example, to increase student input. The other thing is that, I'm going to give a plug for my own kind, social studies teachers could work with their government classes so that it's not just limited to a hand-picked few to choose an issue that they would like to see a change. I'm a little concerned about committing monthly. There may not be anything that a student has to say in that moment. We may already have a really long meeting. It limits the number of students who have input in the process of who gets to talk to the board. So I would say,
that would be.
Can I finish, please?
Sure, go ahead.
So I would say that we should encourage student participation in the board, but I would suggest that we think about and discuss doing it in a way that broadens the participation among more students.
Okay.
That's
Yes,
fine.
wait a minute, and some other people, and we'll get back to you. Yes, Mrs. Alone.
Can you clarify if you're suggesting that the person sit at the table, at the dais, and engage in the discussion of the various agenda items, or certain specific agenda items?
No, that would be their agenda item. They would make a presentation, just as the superintendent has a superintendent's report. We could have that student make a student report.
And would they be involved in the discussion? My concern
No.
is,
No.
we're elected officials. We represent we represent our electorate to this discussion and decision-making process. And while I certainly appreciate that we wanted to, in a very tangible way, have the students' concerns represented, I'm not sure that this is the venue that we want to have somebody present at the board table. I'm just not sure that that's appropriate.
Anyway, Mr. Galetta, I think I saw your name.
Yes.
I'd like
I would say.
It was all right. It was good.
Is it on? I just turned it off. I would say that students have an avenue to express their concerns or feedback through their student councils, student governments, through their teachers or administration. There is an avenue process kind of set up now for them to do that. Certainly, by all means, they are welcome to come here on board meeting nights.
They can hear. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not bending over when I'm talking. They have an avenue to come here as well at public comment session as individual students to express their concerns as well. I don't think I would want to set up a system that would encourage students to circumvent the processes that are in place, just like we would prefer parents not come directly to the board for an issue, maybe with a classroom teacher or with a principal. There is a process in place, have them go to the classroom teacher, to the principal. If it can't be resolved at that point, certainly come to the superintendent and then maybe to the board if that's the case. I think there's a process in place for student feedback. I'm all for hearing more information from the students, but I think maybe as an awareness, that maybe they have to have more awareness that they do have processes to do that. Maybe they should use them first, give that process a chance.
Mr. Carrion.
If I can just say, as I'm listening, of course we want student involvement. I'm a little confused as well because I'm trying to delineate what is administration and what is the work that we do with students. And if we're looking at, let's say, promoting from a social studies perspective and really increasing the level of politics and talking about what's going on with our school as a community, that can well come out of a course or a few units that can be developed, let's say in politics and government. How to select one child from one school 1 month, select someone else. We've been featuring our students. If the board is really interested in finding out about certain things and certain aspects of what's going on in our schools, our administrative team, we can definitely create surveys. We can even have a student come and provide the report on the survey that was collected. But it's really something that's academics that should come through classes and that should be shared from that perspective. And this conversation, to me, I hope it's just the start of a conversation, because it's something that really has to be well articulated and thought about, and what it is that we're talking about, and what distinctions are we making. What is it that the board's looking for that's not the work of administration? And what is it that we can do to support that? It's not that this is not a no response. I think that this is something that really has to be well thought out. Is it coming from a class, as I said before, and really kind of delineate what is the board's responsibility and what is the administration's responsibility as we move forward to try to involve students to become more active, more so than just coming up to the mic and expressing their opinion.
Mr. Rubin.
I agree with you, Mr. Carey. I'm just wondering, would this really be a topic for a board retreat?
Absolutely, and it's also a topic for our board retreat. I'm with Dr. Cardwell in terms of even working with her team and working with Mrs. Centron, who is our coordinator, our director for social studies and English language arts. I've often said, you do see other school districts where students are taking an active role and from different perspectives, but I think we really need to figure that out, articulate what it is that we're really trying to express. So when we have our retreat, we can definitely make it part of the agenda, and we can come back and create some scenarios that can show the board in terms of featuring our students and what are some of the topics. So that's a good point, Mr. Rubin. If we're going to have certain items that the board really wants to know about in terms of communication, in terms of what's going on in the district, that we want to hear from the students' voices, let's say it's three things. Let's say it's about athletics, and what is it that we want to find out, how competitive we are, how inclusive we are, how not inclusive we may not be, so on and so forth. That can be one item that goes out when we get that information. The same for whatever it is, and we can have students come in and present and provide those presentations. But a combination of our retreat, which is next week, and then you're on the board's retreat, we maybe can come up with something to make this happen.
And
Mr. Rubin.
And I would also like to say that I think that Mr. Coletta raised a great point, that if this turns out to just be to complain about things that are existing in the school, that there's a venue for the students to proceed with that complaint, that we're not here. I don't think you're talking about this to be just a complaint department here, that if they have issues, they talk to the teachers, they talk to the building administration, before they maybe move up the food chain. So I think that's a great.
Yeah, just to clarify, I wasn't talking just about complaints, but any concerns or any ideas or whatever.
The building administration should be involved. It should be discussed whether or not the building administration should be involved in that.
Okay, Mr. Slaughter.
My whole goal, and I appreciate everyone's comments, and hopefully we can continue this dialogue, is what can we do to encourage more participation from the students, not just showing up to get a piece of paper signed for their government class.
Absolutely.
That's all. So,
yeah. And that's what I mean, absolutely. When you have students coming in for participation in government, they can be here maybe with their iPads, and as community members are walking out, there's specific questions to the agenda that they may want to ask those members that attended the meeting, and then probably we can get that report and get it back to you. There's so many things that we can do. It's just the idea of how do we increase this level of student communication. I often say to myself too, when the students are sitting there and they're just coming for a signature, that what would be much more productive and what can we integrate into the PIG class, as we call the acronym, to get them to be more actively involved.
Yes, I would certainly hope that the social studies teachers, as a former social studies teacher myself, and we have some others here on the board, that they are not accepting just a signature, but have an actual assignment that requires more than that they counted how many board members were present and how many items were on the agenda, but that they have to answer something thoughtful about the meeting and what they discern. And I think certainly, they can come, I would hope that the social studies department has all sorts of creative ways of making this a meaningful assignment rather than just sitting through a meeting. So I think that's certainly a good point, and if they can, participate and give a comment, and participate in public comments as part of their participation in government, they would really be participating, to use the word a third time in the same sentence. Participation, right. Thank you.
My thought process was just kind of expanding the olive branch to make them feel a little bit more, included in the process. So I welcome continued discussion on this, and I think we could figure something out. I know we took up a little bit of time. I had a couple of other quick items, so I want to just get through them.
Okay, you want another addition to the agenda?
Another addition to the agenda.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Discussion on...
Okay, wait a minute. You
sorry.
have to make a motion to add something to the agenda first. Okay, second. Mr. Coletta, all those in favor of adding something to the agenda for discussion? Unanimous? Okay, go ahead.
Listen.
Mr. Schleicher used to be out there.
No time limit.
Longer.
No time limit.
How about that?
I'd like to just, a motion for discussion on a board liaison for each municipality that is within the school district. The reason I'd like to bring that up for discussion, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so you're bringing that up. Okay, do we have a second to discuss this? Mr. Luia, all those in favor of discussing this item? Okay, unanimous. Okay, now Mr. Slaughter.
Okay, real quick, the purpose behind that, behind this is, I think it's extremely important that we have a relationship and a dialogue with the municipalities that reside within the school district. Most of us live in those particular municipalities. We have a lot of capital improvement projects coming up this coming year and in the future. And I think there's been a lack of proper communication between what we're trying to accomplish with our facilities and our properties. And I think it'd be a good idea that we have a dialogue with the towns as well as getting information from the towns on construction projects, residential developments, commercial construction, how is that going to affect our enrollment, and things of that nature. So I'd like, to hear some thoughts, if that's okay, from some other board members.
Okay, Mr. Lumia, Chairman of the.
I share your
Capital
concern.
Building.
I think we should have representation to each of the communities, but to say that our representative is bad, I think that's not inaccurate. I think the superintendent has done a good job so far as trying to contact municipalities, but at the same time, I think we should have people that represent us, so that we do know a little bit more than we don't right now.
We should know things while they're happening.
Yeah,
we need to coexist. I'm just trying to build a better mousetrap.
I agree with you.
One at a time.
Okay.
Mr. Lumia still has the floor.
Sorry.
Are you through, Mr. Lumia? Okay.
No, I agree. I think
Right,
there should be
right.
more, that we should have somebody representing us, so we can get better information, more information that's already provided. So
Yes.
I'm in favor of it.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Rubin.
Thank you. That is not a new idea. That is something that I thought about at, last year, as a matter of fact, and I think our superintendent was very good in this, in trying to get towns to be able to sit down, that we could sit down and talk with the towns. When I personally tried to talk with towns and find out something simple, what kind of new major building projects do they have on the table that would affect us? I'm not talking about a Walmart coming in, but housing projects. I was pretty much universally told, you know what, you go to Dutchess County and on their planning website, that's where you're gonna get the information, okay? And they kind of like wash their hands out of that. So I think if the superintendent or the administration can establish a venue where board members can then be a participant in that, I think that's a wonderful thing. I'm not sure that every town would want to, based upon my experience last year. Not every town was really willing to open dialogue there.
Mrs. Karan.
How about inviting them to the Capital Improvement Project Committee?
Same with that.
And, inviting either the towns together or the towns one at a time. And
Yes.
They're actually
and-
invited.
They're invited already.
Right.
They're invited already.
They're invited already, and Mr. Bross and Ms. Crandall are sitting here and we've been told that in just the last couple years by different municipalities that this administration has really increased their level of communication as a district. The only thing I would suggest then, if the board wants, I mean, I'm not one of the board members, but to go to the town meetings and then come back as part of their board report to share some of the important items. But in terms of what we do as a district, and not because President Bittaker is sitting in the audience, but we really start this communication, and we've continued the communication, and we've been told by several municipalities that this administration has really increased. If there's something that you're saying formally,
Well,
it sounds like we have participation from the towns already. Basically,
And the capital improvement
One
committee.
at a time, folks, okay. Mrs. Karan, Mrs. Goodman, she hasn't had a turn yet, and then Mr. Lumia. Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Karan. Did
Well,
you
it sounds like we already have a fair amount of communication taking place. That
one way.
that we are offering, but they're not reciprocating, there's no response.
They don't have to.
Mrs. Goodman.
I would think that legislative committee that you and me and Mrs. Lavalley are on, it seems to me that town boards are legislatures. So I would think that that's probably a way that we can, we can visit during the day, we can make contact, we can say, hi, how are you? We can, we can kind of get a sense of are there big developments pending, has anything, because a lot of times the stuff that's on the website, that's already formally planned. There are developers that are sniffing around and buying up land way before anything is public property. So it's public knowledge. So I would suggest that, quite frankly, it doesn't say who we're supposed to be lobbying. So I think the structure's there.
I think that's a very good idea, and if that committee would like to do that, I think that's wonderful. And attending, I mean, I have noticed, certainly in the town of Poughkeepsie, that very few people come to a lot of the board meetings. And it would be very good if more people went to town and village board meetings to find out exactly the process of what's going on. And you can even watch it at home, since like our school board meetings, they're live streamed, and so you can pick those up. And also, having been a zoning board member, zoning boards and planning boards give you a very good idea of what's coming in the line of development.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Sloshower.
I'll wrap this up because I just have one other quick topic.
Another topic, you have to make
I
another
will do,
addition
I will,
to the agenda.
I will do that.
Okay.
I'm bringing this up because the
You
town that I live in.
want to make another addition?
Well, I'm finishing up on this
Okay.
one. My town of East Fishkill has extended the olive branch for this type of relationship. So that is why I'm bringing it up again. And I know that Trustee Rubin had mentioned it once before, and I did as well. So they're actually in favor of this type of relationship, and I would hope that, you know, if we did have a designated individual for each particular town, if somebody wanted to participate and do that, they could. I think it would be very beneficial. My particular town is, has been very encouraged by this. I've spoken with the supervisor and the councilman, and this is something they would like to do.
Thank you. I think Mr. Lumia had his hand up before, so if you
All I
want
can
to
say is that
something.
people from the community, from the towns, have come to the Capital Improvement Committee and had discussions with the committee. I mean, if it helps us go into each individual people or into a group, I'm all for it.
Is there anything, honey, you want to say anything else before we move on to the next addition to the agenda?
Okay, last one, I promise. Next addition to the agenda is.
You have to ask for an addition.
I'm sorry, I'd like to request an addition to the agenda.
Is it a discussion item?
It is a discussion
Yes.
item.
That's what Mrs. Faber told us. She's the boss. Okay, all right, do we have a second?
I would like to say something.
Yes, certainly.
I will second it, but your honeymoon is over after tonight's work.
Yes.
All those in favor of an addition to the agenda? Okay, do you want to count of who said yes and who said no? All right, then put your hands up if you're agreeing. Okay, Mr. Galetta, Mrs. Karanth, Mrs. Laval, Mr. Sloshower, Mrs. Pelton, Mr. Rubin, Mrs. Keller. Opposed? Mr. Lumia and Mrs. Goodman. Mr. Sloshower.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get all of this in at the last board meeting, so I apologize.
I
All right,
know.
so one last thing. I don't, again, I apologize. I just comment on the district website. I would ask the administration if they can look into, we made revisions to the website. It came out in January. There's one part that I'm not sure what his timeline is. Perhaps he could let us know. We had discussed in strategic planning that we were going to have a link on the website that listed all community members that assisted the schools within the district with different types of goods and services and donations. It was to be used as a database for all schools to share that information. I was wondering if that is part of the next wave on strategic planning for this school year. Also, another component of that was that we were going to recognize community members monthly or quarterly with things that they've done for the school district. I've been out in the community. I've heard good things and bad things. Some businesses feel they're not getting the recognition. They do a lot for the schools within the district. I know it's not a big thing, but it is something that we talked about in strategic planning, that we would recognize our businesses and local businesses to utilize their goods and services and have some type of reciprocal relationship. So I'm just wondering if that's something that's within the next wave on strategic planning. I don't think it would be a big project to have a link on the website that recognizes those particular businesses that are helping us, as well as a database for building principals. And I don't want to put it back with PTA, because there's certain things that the building principals do that they don't do in conjunction with the PTA. So I just wanted to express that and just say hopefully that's forthcoming in the next wave on strategic planning.
Mr. Lumi.
I'm finished.
Just for people information, businesses have been recognized by being a lot of time for all the good they've done for the district. So it's not the first time it has been mentioned, but they have been recognized. So, I mean, if you want to put something on the website, by all means do so, but we have, as a board, recognized businesses which have contributed in many, many, many instances.
Mrs. Pelton.
Here you go.
Turned it off.
I did.
Where the battery's gone?
Here.
You want another one?
Take this.
Red,
Okay, we'll take it.
Just quickly, I agree that they need to be recognized. I'm wondering if this is something that our PR person could facilitate, because I don't think it's just about being recognized, it's also about being a resource. So if that's something that we're able to put on, is that something that she could handle?
The
Yes, Mr. Carrier.
Let me get rid of this. You stole my thunder, Tracy.
The strategic planning committee consists of community members, board members, and I believe, I'm forgetting the name of what, there are like 5 goals, and then there are about, I don't know how many end results within those goals, and the activities, and as an entire team, you select those. And of course, we do make some recommendations, and that's in our agenda for the administrators retreat, the strategic planning committee. When we had our core planning team this year, there were recommendations to continue the work that we had started the year before, as well as just adding a couple more end results, because they felt that we took on way too much. And although we took on way too much, we did accomplish a lot of what it is that we set forth with those end results. So each year, and if you were part of the strategic planning committee.
Yeah, one of the strategies.
Right, so those strategies, as you know, go all the way up to like the year 2019. So we have to continue to work on these items, and we have to prioritize and see which ones are going to be selected and which ones are going to be approved by the strategic planning committee.
Anyone else?
One.
Mr. Rude.
Second. I need a second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Just a quick question.
Yes. All those in favor?
Oh, wow, Mr. Would you?
9 working microphones for our next meeting. That's all, it's just a request. Can we see what we can do about having working microphones at the board table?
Time to start fundraising.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything more? All right, in that case, I guess it's time for communications from the public. All right, you may speak at any topic that has to do with school district business, even if it was not on the agenda. Thank you.
I'm willing to donate my 3, I think really 6 minutes to somebody. Can't say the names right. So. I'm a little confused. When I started speaking in NISBA before, it's on the agenda. That's why I'm so confused. That's why I think I'm entitled to 6 minutes right now.
It's in the reorganization.
It was in the reorganization.
Yeah, but it's still an agenda item, and it's about membership, and it's about my tax money being spent on it.
Okay, Mrs. Pedro, was it permitted to speak on agenda items that were in the reorg meeting, or was it only supposed to be for business meeting that was coming up?
I believe that the way it's listed, it said public comments on regular business agenda items, so that would exclude the reorg.
All right.
Okay, but you get to talk about it now.
6 minutes? Yeah.
Maybe you could share your time with somebody else.
I
If you have
will.
a friend who'd like to give the rest of your speech.
I will. I don't approve of spending that money on NISBA. I've done my own research. I do not like the followings of NISBA because of their national affiliation and the national affiliation with the federal government. Don't like it. I think we all know what happened today. Yeah, the FBI screwed us. Oh yeah. We need to act on our own. We're our own responsibility. We need to be acting and thinking locally. Taking these adoptions from a state agency, I think, is a huge mistake. I think it's taken the thought process out from beneath our feet that I think is a responsibility of this board to have discussions and not leave it to an entity to decide for us. We do have legal counsel for these questions when they're needed. And I think that's a very good use of money. And they should be available, especially under retainer, for a quick phone call to answer a question, just like NISBA would be. So I am completely against that. I'm also, I just wanted to say thank you very much also on the cursive writing decision. I think that was extremely huge, and I think that is the beginnings of maybe bringing some learning back into the classroom where students are actually retaining information. So I'm very, very excited about that. Now, if we can just trash Common Core, we might be going someplace. The surveys that I heard everybody speaking about with the students, I'm not a fan of them. I didn't even take the recent survey, the parent survey, because I couldn't. The first question, none of the responses fit my needs, so I stopped right there. I think the surveys actually stifle communication. And I know that I spoke to, at the time, Mr. Solskjaer when he was going around meet the candidates and all that. I know exactly what the students were subjecting him to. They were very viable pieces of information. And it wasn't complaining stuff at all. It was actually really useful. So maybe, at your own time, you can maybe speak to Mr. Solskjaer to find out what he found out, because I really think there's some great info there. And it's not complaining, it's not bitching at all, but really very useful stuff. So, student trips, I just wanted to touch base on that. I have stood up several times for any family that needs traveling money. And so have many other parents, and we don't have an issue in our district with that, thankfully. The money always comes somewhere, and somebody's always willing to step up. PTAs have, bounced things back and forth, they're willing to share, as are just parents. So thank God for that. What was the other thing? I'm done.
Okay, does anybody else wish to speak?
Hi, good evening. Piggybacking off what Mo was saying, PTA can provide for those trips, and you're a teacher, you know that. I think it's more humiliating for them, for there to be, if you can't afford this, check here. I think that's a little bit more humiliating, in my opinion. As teachers and administrators, we know who those who can't afford it, and the PTA does a great job of raising money. So I don't think a checkbox is really appropriate. Thank you, I was speaking. And going back to what Eddie had said about having the kids having more voices, I think that's a great idea. Kids used to run for president and vice president. I know when I was in high school, eons, 20 some odd years ago. Do they still do that? And if not, maybe that would be a good way to get them involved more in the community. Part of the mission statement is to realize their potential while growing as responsible members of their community. I think if you give them a voice and a say in their community, I think you'll empower them a lot more. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Tanya Clifton, and I am a teacher at Boise Kitchen High School. I'm also an advisor for the Pride Club and an advisor for Mastermind as well. Just so you know, we have a scholarship for the Mastermind kids who can't afford to go, but there is an application process and it gets a little hairy. I would love to sit down and talk to you about ideas of making things more inclusive, certainly. In terms of I applaud you for being a part of NISBA. I think it is best practice across the board for professionals to be a part of a professional organization. Certainly doctors and lawyers, and it's an expectation that me as a teacher, that I would be part of a professional organization, and I certainly am. And so I applaud you as a board for being a part of your professional organization, which is certainly a best practice. With regard to the code of conduct, I think it's important that as many people be a part of committee meetings to discuss the implementation of some of the newer issues on the code of conduct. And I certainly look forward to being a part of those committees. I also think it's very important that as leaders of the Board of Ed, we be very careful, as leaders of this district, people on the Board of Ed and teachers and so forth, it's really important that you think about the language that you use and the way you discuss issues involving communities, for example, the LGBTQ community. I think that when people in leadership in a district make very clearly anti-LGBTQ comments, perhaps not in a meeting, but they make it very clear what their opinion is on social media, it can be very hurtful. It can be, it can feel like a tremendous slap in the face to members of that community. And I just would ask you to please be very mindful about what you put out there for the public to see. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? In that case, do we have a motion for adjournment? Mr. Lemire, second. Mr. Slowshower, all those in favor?